international leaders in education. Today, I am going to be moderating a conversation with Rashina Walker, Dr. Miguel Barker, and Bruce Major. I am presently in Atlanta, Georgia, so sending lots of love and light to the Middle East. I taught in Dubai. I've worked with KDSL Global and working in the Middle East and North African area and region. And so my recent work has been more so in providing professional development and professional learning sessions for educators. We are going to give a quick intro, quick background, and then we're going to hop right into our discussion on the value of diversity amongst Black leaders. So we will start with Dr. Barker. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background?
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Miguel. I am Jamaican by birth, and I've been in education for over 25 years, 9 of which has been as an international educator, and 10 of those years, and 19 of those years where I've worked internationally. The distinction is that I worked for 10 years in the UK, which is a different experience from working internationally as an international educator. I am currently the assistant principal in the middle school for an international school in Muscat, as well as I'm the MYP coordinator. So I look forward to sharing in this discussion and maybe sharing more later.
All right, thank you. So now we'll hop over to Rashina. Rashina, are you still in Dubai, or have you made it back stateside? Wait.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you a little better now. If you can go louder.
Is this better? Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Is that good? The volume's good or no?
If it can go up a little bit, that would be great.
Let me see if I can just talk louder. How did that work?
That'll be fine. That'll work.
Okay. All right. I'll probably turn it off after this. Yeah, I just flew back yesterday from Dubai. So we are in Atlanta for this week before we head up to North Carolina. So before I was in Dubai the last 9 years, 5 years in Al Ain, and then 5 years in about 4.5 years in Dubai. I've worked in several private schools. I worked in the government school. My last job, I was working as vice principal at Dubai Arabian American School. Absolutely amazing experience. It was a transitional school during a turnaround, and we were able to accomplish a lot in such a short period of time. So now I'll be entering new role full-time, working with DODEA at their schools in Fort Bragg, and I have one school in Cuba. So I will be working on their professional development. And then, of course, doing things with KDSL, working with schools all over the world and helping to improve their education systems.
All right, nice. Welcome to the U.S. I'm also in Atlanta.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so now we're going to hop over to Bruce Major. Can you tell us your location and just a little bit about your background and experience?
Absolutely. Greetings from the very, very hot city of Dubai. I'm just concluding my first year as an administrator here in Dubai. I am the superintendent of Collegiate American School. And prior to that, I did 4 years in China, in mainland China, in the cities of Hangzhou and Shaoxing, leading bilingual schools and international schools there. And the vast majority of my experience as a school administrator has been in Charlotte, North Carolina, leading an inner city charter schools, one of the largest inner city charter schools in the state of North Carolina. So taking that experience, I went international in 2014 and landed in Dubai, and I'm enjoying every second of it. So greetings, it's a pleasure meeting each of you.
Thank you. Likewise. So as you all can see, our panel here has a wide range of experience from working with educators in a professional development or learning setting to leading and guiding and turning around schools. A question that I have for you all today that I want you to think about is, as a Black international school leader, there are often challenges that educators of color face, especially in the U.S. and outside of the U.S. We are oftentimes faced with challenges. Do you all feel that your unique attributes or your unique traits, characteristics, skills, and experiences have been valued in an international academic setting?
I would say definitely. When it comes to actually initially getting a job, especially one of the big things for me was transitioning internationally. Everything on your CV should include your picture. And we know in the US, like that's something that automatically discriminates you from a lot of positions. Once they see your face, once they see your color or whatever, it's any type of identifying aspects of you that automatically start to put people to classify you in pockets. So to have my picture on my CV was a little daunting for me at first. But I've never felt like I've been discriminated against in any positions or anything like that. But I have felt like maybe people have targeted me because they feel like, oh, she's from America and she's Black, so she knows how to deal with these type of students. So that's actually kind of given me an advantage where I've been able to come in schools, and because we've had diverse experiences, I know how to deal with students that aren't necessarily the best behaved, or they're a little bit more challenging to deal with for whatever reason, or they have, some learning challenges, and a lot of people forget that in the Middle East, we're primarily dealing with second language learners. So they might have behavior issues, but it's for a different reason. But at the end of the day, it's the same results that are happening in kids in the US in inner city schools or disadvantaged areas. So I feel like we do have an advantage in the sense that people don't look at us, as far as our color. They look at us as an American versus being a Black American or somebody of color. But I do feel like in certain cases where they expect us to do positions that are more difficult, that other people wouldn't be able to handle because they feel like we have automatically had these type of experiences, or that we're able to handle it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rashina, for your feedback. Miguel, were you about to say something? Miguel, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, sorry about that. I have a practice of keeping myself quiet when I'm listening. So online, that's not a good practice. But yes, I was just listening to the thoughts shared by Rashina. I think there is, it's a difficult thing to capture what happens when a Black person goes to work internationally. And I think by virtue of speaking English, it in some way creates a different class in which you're allowed to exist. In a sense, because English is a language that dominates international schools, what happens if you come in as a first language speaker, what happens is that for some reason, there's a different level of acceptance that would have happened in your home country, UK in my case, certainly not Jamaica, where we are all the same. But when you work internationally, there is a sense that you have a little bit, a better chance in some ways of being taken as a human. Like someone is just listening to you and saying you have ideas, I listen to your ideas. But certainly over time, especially if you're in one place for a while, those very same, the familiarity of you being there, you start to see how some of the machinations of the system comes out. And you realize that there are still some limits on what the color of a skin can allow you to achieve. But on the face of it, yes, certainly there is an opportunity there for Black leaders to get into positions and be given a chance to prove themselves.
Okay. So one of the things that I felt like I just noticed traveling internationally, so I'm a Black American, and so one of the things I noticed was I felt like I was given American privilege in certain situations. And so I was like, this is nice. And I was like, this must be what it feels like to experience white privilege, to experience someone, say, oh, wait, you're American. So let me, give you this opportunity, or let me pause and listen to you. But I also know on the flip side of that, there have been times where there are job descriptions for leaders, and they will flat out say they are looking for a white British male, for a leadership position. So Bruce Major, can you share, because I think that it is an absolute honor and an accomplishment for you to be the superintendent of a school in the Middle East, in Dubai. You're the first Black superintendent that I know of. So I'm like, yes, rooting for all of us. But can you share what that journey has been like for you? And if there were moments where you faced like bumps in the road, or if it was just like a smooth transition in?
Sure. So nothing is ever smooth, right? There's always going to be some obstacles that we have to overcome. But I do concur with my other panelists in what they have expressed. For me, I think yes, I've definitely experienced the privilege of being an American. But I think the other thing that has come along with that is the propensity for us to have to overcome stereotypes. And it really depends on where you are. For example, my experience in China, when I first got there, I was the first African-American person that my students had ever seen, and in fact, in some cities, I was the first American or first foreigner they had ever seen. So it was important and because of that, my interactions with them, a lot of my interactions with them were based on stereotypes that they have, and expectations for that. So it kind of harkened back to that whole concept of, being an African-American, and when you're here, is that at some point we have to rely on our own abilities, right? And our own, what we bring to the table in overcoming those stereotypes and those obstacles. And I think that's been something that's always the forefront of my mind as I do that, as I seek opportunities. Have I ever felt that I faced discrimination? Probably so. Yeah, where, when I didn't have my picture on my CV and I got a lot of calls, and then you put your picture on your CV and you don't get as many calls, but I think at the end of the day, it's going to be what we as educators are bringing to the table to offer to the organizations that we are seeking. If given that opportunity, despite race or prejudices or stereotypes, that if we can, as educators, are bringing that skill set to the table, bringing our experience, bringing our knowledge to the table, I think that gradually changes mind. And again, those things aren't necessarily based off of something that's malicious. It's often out of pure ignorance that they don't have the opportunity. There hasn't been an opportunity for them to engage an African-American leader, or to engage an African-American professional, or a professional from any diverse population. And so it's a risk on their part, but again, the onus is on us to deliver when that occurs.
I think too, at some of the schools, I've recently heard of some poor leadership and management where organizations they've less diversified their leadership. I had a friend that just applied for a position at a very prominent school in Dubai, and she passed all of the interview questions. She knew the content. She had all of the subject knowledge. She knew the pedagogy. The last interview, part 3, was with the principal. The principal was a white Canadian. And one of the questions that she asked her, she only asked her 2 questions. The first question was, how do you deal with student safety? Of course, when you're dealing with health and safety issues, reported to the counselor, things like that. And the second question was, how do you feel about the recent issues in the US with George Floyd, and how does that affect your performance at work? First of all, the person was not even American. She was Black Jamaican, so it's just that perception that just being Black, you're either from Africa at some point and you're just an immigrant to America, or, at some point you're only from 1 or 2 places, that's it. So that showed her ignorance there. And to even ask that type of question is inappropriate. Like, it has nothing to do with her. It's a personal issue, however she felt, and it shouldn't have, any professional you hire, their personal shouldn't have anything to do with their performance at work. But to ask that sort of question was just completely out of line. For her, she handled it very well. I'm not sure if I would have been able to handle it as well as she did, but she was very professional. But I think too, when you're looking at leadership in organizations, when you look at what they have and how they are becoming less diverse. As Ashley said, some of the organizations are asking specifically for white men, or you'll see the type of qualifications that they ask for. They'll say European or Irish, or, you know, things like that. They're not necessarily saying white, but the majority of people that live there are white. There are not that many Black that live there. So they're pretty much saying that they want either a white male or a white female. And when you bring these type of people in that are either scared of Black people, or, you know, they have preconceived notions, and you get these type of questions that have nothing to do with the person's performance, nothing to do with the person's abilities and what they can do to improve the school.
Yeah. Now, I think, yeah, those are some very important points. I think what Bruce is talking about, though, the stereotype is such a major obstacle to overcome for us, you know, because that leads to the type of opportunities that that is presented to us, you know. I do want to say congratulations as well, Bruce, because for me, it is one of those things that I look at and say, is it possible for someone to sit in a room and make a decision and say, okay, I'll hire this person based on just the content of their character, not what it looks like in terms of marketing and what it could mean in terms of explanations and so on. So I think the stereotype is a part, and part of it is based on ignorance. You know, people just don't understand other people. And perhaps one of the challenges that we face as a Black people outside of our home countries is, how do we educate people to see beyond just the stereotypes that they have about us? And so you begin jobs trying to prove that you're not like. You know, it's really one of those things that, and you have people working with that you have to show them that you're not like, you know, in a sense that they'll give you challenges. And as you're working through, you know, this is a challenge to see you're not like. So it's a stereotype piece and the link that it plays with opportunities, because I've always felt that the biggest challenge we face was not given the kind of opportunities that everyone else has. You know, I've seen many people who have been in roles perform excellently in those roles, but no one's calling them in the office and saying, hey, we have another role at a higher level that I think you should do. You have to go back into the trenches and prove yourself to get to the next one. And so, you know, it is understanding that and trying to find a way to culture people to understand that we're all humans and we all need a few chats. But it's really around the stereotypes. People don't know you and they make decisions based on what they know, they think they know about a group of people, and we have to fight that all the time. I think we've lost Ashley.
Yeah, Ashley, we're back on you.
Yes, yes. So my power went out.
Oh. So it's really storming where you are.
Yes, it is. And so thank you all for keeping the conversation going. I like the fact that you all are bringing up the stereotypes, because a part of me feels like, okay, I have actually, when I was in undergrad, I went and I student taught in England, and it was Sheffield, England, and I absolutely enjoyed and loved the experience. However, the very first day that I got there, it was about, I think it was like 8 of us, like 6 white girls from our college and then 2 Blacks. And so when I got there, one of the students, I think she was like year 2, she came up to me and she was like, I've never seen a brown person before. And so that placed me, and oftentimes when I share this story, especially people who are from the UK are like, really? Surely they've seen brown people. But I think that we have to just, you know, acknowledge, like, for some people, their lives are their communities. You know, the world for them is their community. And some people don't go outside of that community. So for her, seeing me, a brown person or a Black person in her school, that was something new and different from her. I did in the moment, I said, well, can I have a hug? And she was like, yes. And so I kneeled down and I gave her a hug. And the 2 of us formed a really tight bond and relationship over the time that I was there. Upon leaving, one of the things that I felt was important for me, I was like, okay, as a Black educator, as a Black female educator, it is important for me to go back out into the world. It's important for me, like to not just come back to the US and go, back to my old community and teach the kids. It's important for me to just like shed and, shine light. And so I think a question that I have is like, how much of it is our responsibility to break stereotypes that we didn't really create? A lot of the stereotypes about Black people have been created, from different subgroups that, like Bruce said, display ignorance, because of their lack of knowledge. They're like, oh, all Black people like watermelon, or all Black people like fried chicken. So let me make this laugh now, let me make this joke to my teacher, when it's like, okay, I do like watermelon, but this isn't a, laughing matter. So what role or responsibility as educators or educational leaders should we play in busting or breaking apart stereotypes? Or do we just go into our jobs, our respective roles, and do we address the stereotypes? Do we go into these respective roles and display professionalism, and like just show that our knowledge is there? Or do we actively work towards not only doing our job, but working towards breaking and busting stereotypes as well?
Sure. Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll take that question. I think it's a combination of both in a sense. I do think we have a responsibility as a minority person to not necessarily shed stereotypes, but to diffuse stereotypes. And what I mean by that is diversity is diversity. So I think if we think about being in a global economy, a global society, then I think that how do you overcome ignorance and prejudice is through empathy and understanding. So I think it's our responsibility as a minority person, again, not only for an African American or an African person or a person of African descent, but a person from any minority group, from a minority population. I think it's incumbent upon us as educators to educate our population, the people around us, whomever that may be, that as we learn from each other and we talk about true diversity, we talk about understanding each other, we talk about empathy for one another, then those stereotypes don't really matter. So again, you're busting the stereotype, but you're doing it in a larger context. The larger context is that we are all one race, the human race, and how do you understand that person? And so that's a strategic way that you do it too. I mean, you got to learn about the majority of society that you're in. So when I go to China, I have to be aware of what the society is like and that culture is like and what those students' perceptions are. Here in the UAE, the same thing holds true. We have a larger population of folks here, of a diverse population, but I think it's incumbent upon all of us to seek to understand. And I think when we model that seeking to understand in cultures, then you understand why they do that. I hate when people tell me, these kids are like this way, or these people are like that way. Well, first of all, I doubt that you know every person of that race and that culture. I doubt that you know every student in that building. So I think it's, okay, let me understand that person. Let me understand where he or she's coming from. And we'd have a shared experience, or maybe I'm learning something new from that person. And I think that then not only dispels the stereotypes, but it makes those bridges, builds bridges for us to connect with one another.
Yeah, I agree with that, Bruce. I've had a few schools where I've worked in the school, and before coming to the school, it's the type of mentality where these kids are like this or these kids are like that. And I think it goes back to what Ashley said, where some people, their community is their life. So they've only worked in certain type of schools with certain type of populations. So when they choose to go abroad and work internationally and work with different type of students, they don't have that knowledge or background to be able to work with different types of students, because they only know their community from before, those type of students. So when you're saying, oh, these kids are like this, these kids are like that, this is a warning, oh, beware of that school. Okay, why are the kids like that? Do you know their background? Do you know their community? Do you know their culture, their expectations? There's a reason why this behavior is there, and how do you integrate in that behavior and then put the norm and the new expectation for them? And unless you have, that diversity, or even just the mindset of diversity, they don't really know how to do that. I've worked in a school before. Most schools I've been at have let me be me and be, my normal self. So I haven't really had too many problems where I've had to, change myself or change the perception of me to be less Black or to be less Southern Black. I'm loud and I like to talk a lot. And yes, I like fried chicken and I like watermelon. Like those are my cultural staples. But I haven't had too many places where I've worked at where I've had to talk quieter or where I haven't been able to use my normal vernacular because people would think that I'm too Black or I'm fitting this perception of what's on TV. I've actually had the reverse where people have asked me why I'm not like this person on TV or why am I not like this episode of what they saw on whatever. YouTube is amazing, but it's also opened up things to different cultures that they don't understand why it's like that. So they think that this is the norm, that all Black people are like the TV show South Central, all Black people are like, Tupac. I was at a school where the kids, they love Tupac, they love Biggie, they love Migos, they love all of these things, and it's like, oh, Migos were my students when I was working at this school. And it's like, wow, miss, wow, it's so exciting for them to be able to have that, one degree of connection. But at the same time, I've had students where they call each other the N-word. And then I have to make that a teachable moment about Black history, where this N-word comes from, what the real meaning of it. And it's not something that you can just throw around freely. Yes, these rappers are saying it, but it's part of the culture. It's part of an understanding that you haven't quite connected to yet. So that's when I feel like it's my responsibility to make our pop culture knowledgeable for them so that they can access the background information and they know what's appropriate to say and what's appropriate to not say, because they felt like that was okay to say it to me. That's not okay to say it to me. That's not appropriate. One, I'm the vice principal in the school. You would never say that to any person in authority. Secondly, this is the history of that word. It's just not something to throw across like that. So I felt like that was my responsibility to give it to them. And in several schools, I've actually put Black History Month on the school calendar. So it's something that they learn and they celebrate and they know the history of Black culture and where it comes from. I did it at one school and I made, on my door, I decorated it. I'm not sure if any of you guys have seen the picture of the girl with the big afro and it's on the door decoration. I put that there and the principal asked me to remove it. Why? Her first thing was that, oh, you're not the only type of person with this type of hair. Arabic people have this type of hair. Okay, but what Arabic person has gone to a school and they've asked them to cut their hair or to remove this from their hair because it's not fitting into the cultural norms of their expectations of what hair should look like? Nobody has in your community. So, okay, I will put a scarf around her hair. Is that okay? Then it was, oh, the lipstick. Take the lipstick off because her lips are so big and the lipstick is red and we don't want the girls to have this type of image portrayed. Okay, but all of them are wearing lipstick. Why does my girl on my door have to take the lipstick off? So then I understood, okay, this is not about Islamic norms or practicing, portraying the Islamic principles in the school. This is about the girl looking like me. And the principal did not like that I colored my hair. She didn't like any of these things, but she couldn't tell me not to do it because I'm the only person in the school not wearing a shayla. So she knew that it was going to be a little bit of, discriminatory, that I would recognize it if she put these things. But once she talked about the image, I knew exactly what the perception was that she had of me in the school. And it was just her. I never had any problems with anybody, but it's breaking down these stereotypes that, yes, people do have curly hair. Yes, people do have kinky hair, not just Blacks, not just Africans, but at the same time, you're not having your hair cut when you're on, a football field. You're not able to not get a job because you have an afro. You're not being asked to cut your dreadlocks off because it's not professional. Nobody's asking you to do anything to your hair that's affecting your work or being able to make a living. That's the difference between being Black and being somebody else with this type of hair.
So, jump on to that. What is interesting is that, the idea that Black is a monoculture, for me, that has been one of the biggest challenge I face in handling this complexity, because many people seem to think that there is one idea of Blackness. And certainly in a work environment, I can model that, as Bruce pointed out, and they can see that perhaps I'm not who they thought I was. But just walking around, people just see you, and whatever perception they have of the Black race, that becomes you. And so that's the first piece, is that it's not a monoculture. I mean, on this panel at the moment, I'm Jamaican, really. I'm Jamaican food, Jamaican everything. You're American, and some of the stereotypes that are leveled at you would never be leveled at me. That just doesn't mean anything to me. But people do level them at me. That's the point. And they walk away with other behavioral attributes that they assign to maybe African American. I had a colleague once who I was appraising, and I remember in a meeting with him, and he said to me, he's from Canada, and he said to me that when he was growing up, he just thought his word for a Black person was African American. There was no other word. So for them, in whatever his education was, if you were Black, you're African American. There is no other conception of being Black as being that. So that's one point that makes this a little bit challenging, because even when we try to dispel, so I think I want to go with the idea of being yourself and affect the space, be the candle that is lighting that part of the darkness that you're in and creating that light. I want to go with that, because the battle to break stereotypes, some of them I don't even know some of them. So I remember having another conversation just recently with someone in authority at my school, and we're just having a reasoning about job options and looking forward about what I'd like to do. Because for a number of years, people have been saying, Miguel, what's going on with you? You finish your studies, you're this, you're that. What's going on? Are you looking to move? I'm comfortable, to be fair. But the point is, there was this idea that I was looking at a job, and she was like, you'll certainly get it. That's what she was saying to me. And she's really supportive. She's like, there's no way you won't get this job. Yeah. And I was like, but she said, you need to work on one thing. You need to be a little bit more, get out there and be aggressive and be a little more assertive in certain situations with people, that people know you're there, go out and network. And I said, you know what, that's a good thing to say, but I've had to hone a different character to survive in this space, And I had to learn to not be as, braggadocious as such, be out there in conversations. People take that really personally if it's a Black person doing it. They don't take it as a positive thing. Many don't. I want to generalize here. But I said to her, there's something that you don't understand about the world. And it was amazing when I said it. I knew she didn't ever thought of this in this way. And I said, have you ever left a job and walked away when you didn't get that job? You said, perhaps I did not get that job because I was white. Have you ever left a job interview and felt that way, like your whiteness could perhaps play the role in a job decision, not making the panel, not making the shortlist, not making the long list? And I said, whether I want to believe it exists or not, these are thoughts I have when I don't get the opportunities that I go for. And I said, that's the definition of having a privilege. I said, most time you hear the term, that's what it means. You can walk away and you don't have to ask yourself. And then in that time she said to me, I've always said sometimes I wonder if I didn't get it because I was a woman. And I said, that also is one of the challenges we face. So just understand that this is about opportunity. I don't want a free meal. I don't think any person out there who wants a free meal. We want opportunities. We want a fair chance whenever there is something out there. And that leads to perhaps the idea of what do we do to show that there is a value in diversity. And that's really what our job is, to show them that there is a value, because many people find monoculturality, finding having people that they're grown up with as strength. They don't see that diversity as providing strength. And that's really where the challenge is.
All right. So Miguel, you mentioned the challenge or the duty or responsibility is, do you think it's for us to show the value as educators, as Black educators? Do you think it's out?
You ask a good question. And throughout the discussion, it's one of the things I do wonder about. I remember having a conversation with Kevin Simpson about this, because it really perplexes me that I need to educate people to treat me like how I treat them. It really perplexes me that I need to go into the world and say, if you want to be if you want to be a human, you just need to start thinking of me as how I think of you. It really is hard, but in the moments where I have an opportunity to, I do try to let them judge me by my work. I try to ensure that my work shows that my experiences of being a Jamaican, being a Black person, being someone who has experienced the world as a person of some less privilege, allows me to inject into conversations and in plans and in future strategic thinking a way in which organizations can be more inclusive. I provide that voice. I provide those lens so that my organization can say, I try not to be Black in that presentation, but I do ask them to think wider, deeper, think more, and see more things. And so that's my role, perhaps, for them to see that the value of a cognitively diverse team provides greater impact than one that thinks in a groupthink way. That's maybe my piece on it.
I think I agree with that. I think the answer to your question is inherent in our title, is that we're educators. And I think, and we're educators of color, then I think it's incumbent upon us to be that person that tries to educate. Now that may sound very simplistic, but I think our responsibility, we do have that responsibility, just like the majority population should have the responsibility to try to understand. We should have the responsibility to try to explain. Albeit fair or not, I think it's a reasonable expectation, because people know what they know based on what they know. If you want to change that, someone has to play that role. And again, I think it's inherent in our title as an educator, is that we're the ones, at least in the realm of education, to share that, or it will never change. It will never change. And again, fair or not, it will never change unless someone steps up and tries to do that. And then it also has to have a responsible person to receive it, but we at least have to try to do it.
Thank you for that perspective. I know that's something that I've personally struggled with. It's like, am I here, I've had colleagues where I felt like in all of our, downtime where we're having lunch, we're talking, we're discussing, I felt like I was constantly educating on race relations, constantly educating on what it was like to be Black and teaching in the Middle East, and like some of the obstacles that I would face, and also some of the celebrations, and then with the recent events and activities that have taken place in the U.S. around gun violence, and I'm saying recent, but this has been taking place for years, but like in March with the killing of George Floyd, and then all of the shooting and police brutality, it was like, it felt like things changed. It felt like, oh, okay, the world is listening now. And now that you're listening, as a Black American woman and educator, I was tired. I was like, wait, is this still my role and responsibility to continue to educate? Or should we have educators, these white educators, go out, speak up? Like one of the things I was doing was sending white fragility. I'm like, here, read this book. Because when I was reading it, I found myself highlighting every single line. I was like, oh, this isn't for me, So I'm glad that you mentioned that, Bruce, that yes, part of it is our responsibility. And so it's just something that, I guess, we need to accept, but then it's also the responsibility of the people on the other side to, to want to show empathy and to show like, all right, understanding. And then to also, like, the act of changing. We're going to be wrapping up in a second. And so one of the questions that I taught in a school where the elementary principal was a white male and the elementary assistant principal was a white female. The middle school principal and assistant principal were white males. The high school principal, white male. High school assistant principal, white male. Director, white male. I challenged my director, who at this moment, he was the first director to actually bring Black educators into the school. And he brought us in, and after he brought us in, he also, he protected us. One of my colleagues graduated from Morehouse, graduated from George Washington. The parents were like, we don't want him teaching our kids. we don't, you know, and the director came in and put his resume on the table. He said, listen, he's more qualified than I am to teach your child. And so he really, you know, stood behind us. But my question is that there are situations where the leadership is heavily white male dominated. And so as Black leaders, especially in positions of power, what are some of the next steps that we can take to ensure more educators of color are provided with roles and positions to showcase their talents?
I definitely feel like panels like this, discussion and just supporting each other in general. I myself have experienced too many times where not only am I the only Black leader in the school, I'm the only Black person in the school, you know, and it's difficult because you never know, you're always wondering what's happening behind your back when you're not there, you know, what's being said, what's being planned, and you're not a part of it. And then it's just like, oh, by the way, this is happening. And it's like, what do you mean by the way? I'm the by the way. Nothing should be planned or happening without my knowledge or input on it, you know, so it is always that perception. For me, I always try to build community, you know, whether it was in Dubai or whether it's in other countries or whatever the case is. I'm always trying to make connections and build community because it's the biggest thing to support, especially being international. It's very transient. People come, people go. We know how schools are at any moment. You know, you could have a job and the next moment you don't have a job. So just making sure that we stay in positions of leadership is important to me. So if there's somebody I know that is aspiring to be a leader, I try to mentor them and coach them and point them in the right direction of, okay, yes, we have more responsibility than anybody else, not just performing on our job, but perception, know-how, being more professional than anybody else in the school. You know, you don't just represent yourself, you're representing your mom, your dad, the entire country, the entire universe. You know, this is what falls on our back, just because, you know, we don't have, it's not the privilege that we have. Whatever comes from one Black person, it's automatically stereotyped that we're all like that. I remember in Abu Dhabi a few years ago, right after I came, there was this big perception that all Black people from Atlanta are mean and they fight and they're loud and they're not professional. So the organization literally stopped hiring Black teachers from Atlanta because of this perception, when that's not the case. You know, everybody from Atlanta isn't from Atlanta. That was an interview spot. So people drove in from all over to interview from Atlanta. That doesn't mean that all Black people are like this. It doesn't mean that all Black people from Atlanta are like that. So that was a stereotype I took personally, because it's like, one, there are great people that want jobs, and you're literally saying if they're from this area, you're not going to hire them. And not just, you know, if they're from Atlanta, but if they're Black and from Atlanta. This was a horrible stereotype, and it was something that we had to break. We had to fight, and we had to put it out there that this is not us, and they're not representing the entire population, the entire world. But unfortunately, we're just bunched up in that type of stereotype. So when it comes to, you know, keeping us in these type of positions, community is the biggest thing. And, you know, banding together, whether it's here or in other countries, you know, it's literally trying to support each other as much as possible. At the end of the day, when it comes to international leadership, when it comes to working internationally in general, we have to band together. You know, it's just us. We're just all Americans, or we're just all colored, or we're just all minorities, or we're just all women. That's it. And that's how you have to look at it. So it's not necessarily that you're supporting a Black person, but you're supporting a person that's got similarities to you. And you want to make sure that you see more of yourself in these type of positions, and that organizations are fair, because they hire all of these companies and you don't see any of us. You don't see any of us in any of these top international schools. So trying to make sure that we enforce that this is the expectation for us also, that will make it become more normal.
All right. Thank you so much, Rashina. And so, guys, we have about a minute left, so we will be wrapping up. It's okay. It's fine. It's fine. So, Bruce and Miguel, is there one hope that you all have for the future of international education for leaders of color?
So I hope I can get this in 30 seconds, but for me, what I think is important is that we do hire and we place people in our schools that's reflective of the population. So diversity means just more than just African American or just more than just Black. I think it's important because the vast majority of our students we're preparing them to study in a global society. They're going to be in the UK or North America or places that are much more diverse than the communities that they're coming from. So it's important for me that you have a staff that reflects that, because you shouldn't have a kid going to college never having met someone from South America or never having met someone from Southeast Asia. So I think it's important that we have that diversity in our hiring practices and in our placements so that our students benefit from it, because we're here for their sake.
Nice.
Yeah, and I just want to mirror that obviously the human race as a whole is a very diverse species, extremely diverse. And we work in international schools where we have a diversity of students in that space. It's important that the people who are also providing that education reflect that diversity. It allows them to have a wider knowledge of what the world is like, and also allow them to break down some of those very stereotypes that they may be picking up from their own cultures. So I think educators and administrators just need to be more deliberate when they go hiring. They need to be thinking about what the post looks like, what pieces they need. Sometimes they need to think about what skill set they need, and not what person, like which country they should be from, but what skill sets they need. And perhaps if they do that, they may find that what they're looking for exists in very exotic places. So that idea of cognitive diversity, they need to keep that in mind. That's all.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for joining us today as we discuss some of our stories and challenges and some of the things that we as educators can do moving forward. I do want to leave with the note of just highlighting empathy. Whenever we are placed in diverse or unique situations, I agree. I know Bruce brought it up earlier, but like empathy is like my word. Seek to understand the population, seek to understand the individuals that we are having conversations with, so that we're able to move forward and we're able to really prepare our students to go out into the world and to be global citizens. So thank you all for joining us. Looking forward to having more conversations with you all. I want you all to stay cool in the Middle East, and I'll try to stay dry over here in Atlanta.
I'll trade you any day.
All right, thank you. It's my pleasure.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shane and Bruce.